All right, guys, let's move on here, man. Did you guys see Tom Aspinall last week? He's training. He wants in, says he's ready for November. He'll fight someone if they tell him now. He'll show up and weigh in as the sub. And if none of that happens, he'll be front row, ready for the winter to anoint him as the next champ. Mike, what do you think of Aspinall's latest antics?
I think it's about time, right? Like he needed to put on this full court press and really try to get his name out there because whatever he's been doing up to this point clearly has not been working or caused any movement. I don't know if this is going to change anything, but him, putting out little videos like he did here, little skits. I think it all is just going to help his cause, and it's greater stirs up the conversation of why are we doing Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. When clearly this man is the most deserving of the fight and potentially the best heavyweight in the world right now. So I think this was long due for Tom. I think maybe his only miss is kind of stirring the pot a little bit when it came to like the Stipe Miocic injury rumors. I don't know how valid that is or whatever the case may be in there. It seems like Stipe quickly came out and swatted that down and said, no, I'm completely fine. I'm ready to go. Fake news. So, you don't want to say a fighter is injured and like going to be out of a fight if there's no credence to it. I think that's maybe a bit of a bad look there, but whatever you got to do, I guess it still creates the headlines. It gets people excited. And yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, I guess, coming up, but he needs to be there in November. If this fight happens, it still hasn't been announced, which is kind of interesting, right? Like the MSG card is official. The date, I think tickets go on sale soon. So maybe that's coming down the pipe any day now. But usually when they present, the fight, the event is happening, especially one, the magnitude of a Madison Square Garden, they like to have a main event attached right off the bat. And that is not the case right now. So you wonder if there is anything happening there. Maybe there is some validity to the injury claims. I don't know. But his opening is still there from all indications. Pen is not put to paper, which I guess means there's always a glimmer of hope. And he is doing what he needs to do right now to get something going for himself. So I guess credit to Tom for finally putting the pedal to the metal here when it comes to this whole thing.
I love it. Yep. The Duke full court press is in effect for sure. Nolan, how about you, man? Stipe did shoot it down like Mike said. He said fake news. He'll be ready to go. But are you buying or selling? Like, what do you think about this, man? Were you confident in what he said amidst everything I guess we hear on a day-to-day basis?
Like about Stipe or just in general?
Yeah, Miocic, and will the fight actually happen, or do you think we'll see Tom in there against someone?
Yeah, I think the fight will still happen. I don't think we have to sound the alarms yet, especially if Stipe is coming out and publicly saying that. I think to me, the way Tom approached this more recent segment of his call-outs of Jon, I think is perfect, to be honest with you. I think he did it in a way that I think we've really grown to like Tom because of the way he carries himself in the sport, right? And so for him to all of a sudden have to be the guy that's being, trash talking and selling fights and being nasty to try to draw Jon in, I think the best way to go about this is the way that he did it. Like he did it with a laugh. He did it in a way that he can say, oh, it's just fooling around. It's just joking. And it's enough to still get his name in every headline. Dana's talking about him at the Contender Series press conference. And so I think Aspinall knocked this one out of the park. And I think, to me, I still think Stipe is going to be next. I think Dana said this too many times for that not to be the case. I think an injury or something really out of left field would have to come through and kind of destroy that. We've seen that happen in MMA. I mean, how many times have crazy things popped up at the last second? So can never say never, but I do think November, Jon Jones, Stipe, barring anybody getting hurt again, we'll see that one next.
I forgot
if someone did get hurt, what do you think they would do? Like if Stipe wasn't available for November, do you think Jon would say if he's ready by March or April, I'm just going to keep waiting? Or do you think at that point the UFC would get a little irritated and be like, okay, well, we'll at least offer you Tom for November. And if you accept it, great. If not, okay.
Yeesh. For one, guys, I get the vibes that Miocic Jones just isn't going to happen. From how Dana's tackled it, and like you said, Mike, where's the promotion? And their age, and Jones is coming off a serious injury, so I think they offer it to Tom, and I think Jones either has to fight or basically, I don't know about retire or just back away while Tom Aspinall becomes the undisputed, and I guess take someone else on I don't know. I really don't know what would...
That clip I just put on is like 18 months old now. It's crazy.
Well, Jones has
It's
replied. He has given some replies to Aspinall. Do you like the approach he's taking, Matt? You know, because he's a gangster no matter what. He is the greatest of all time, but on the way out, it's not a good look a little bit.
No, I'm not a fan of this heavyweight run of Jon Jones by any means, man, because yes, you went in there and you beat Cyril Gane, but we all know Cyril Gane has a glaring hole in his game, a hole that you are actually very good at when it comes to wrestling. So I think everybody saw that path to victory for him. And, you know, it wasn't really, I mean, yes, it was impressive to go up there and do it, but it wasn't like he was tested in any way, so to speak. It was just a higher weight. I don't like this at all, man, because everybody, except for him, Dana White, and Stipe, you know, want this fight, or, you know, want to see him fight Tom Aspinall. So it just doesn't make sense to me how he can be so dismissive of it and saying that Tom Aspinall doesn't deserve it. And he's got Dana saying that Tom Aspinall doesn't deserve it. And it's crazy because he's holding an interim title and defending it. It's ridiculous how they're just kind of playing it off as Tom Aspinall isn't a threat. He's not credible, yada, yada. Stipe's still a GOAT. Stipe is 42 years old and hasn't won a fight since 2020. I mean, it's crazy. It feels like I'm in the Twilight Zone sometimes. Like when I see these back and forth interactions, you know, on social media, it's kind of crazy. I do love the way that Tom is handling it because he also has to be a little bit careful because I think this time next year, Tom Aspinall is going to be the guy that we're talking about. Like, clearly, Jon Jones, I think, will be out of the picture by this time next year. He'll probably retire after the Stipe fight since he's already hinting at it. There's no reason not to believe him. I mean, so he's got to be careful not to piss off the UFC in this whole process, right? Because Tom Aspinall is going to be the guy in I don't know, 12 months time or less. He's going to be the guy at the top of the division that the UFC is going to have to start propping up as the guy. You know, the only other guy.
So what does he have to lose
Jones
then, right? If that's the scenario, like if you're going to be the guy regardless, you might as well go all in. And you know, what are they going to do if you piss them off a little bit?
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference if we're talking about him a year from now as the guy who fought and beat Jon Jones, or if the guy who just took over once he moved on. So if his window is that small, I don't blame him for doing everything he can to try to get the fight. You got to, because that once that window's
also,
gone,
if he doesn't fight him, he can also say I'm the guy that Jon Jones ducked. And he'll have a lot of credible evidence to back that up.
I retired him without fighting him was, I think, his quote in one of those videos. That was the killer.
That's such a sick line.
And, you know, the whole legacy term that gets thrown out, I always say once your legacy's created, it's there. But he also has that whole, you know, for 3 years, one could say he avoided Francis Ngannou. You know, Francis didn't just leave right after he won it. Like, he had a title defense and then some time in between where Jon Jones was getting big and getting prepped or whatever, but that was a long road, you know. And then finally, once he was out, then all of a sudden the path was clear. So that's two big heavyweight names that he just somehow will not have fought if in fact he doesn't fight Aspinall, because Miocic isn't ready to go and he bows out of the sport. So he really should think this one through. I just want to see. I want to see Aspinall get his, whether it's through Jones or just someone else. But let's clear this thing up, man. It is a mess. Yeah. It sucks. And look at Nolan. Do you want to say something?
No, I was going to say, I honestly think like Jon could be talked into this too. Like, I think there is an element of this when Jon came back and he wanted to take 2 more fights. Like, I think the heavyweight title / Francis, you know, there was a little bit of overlap at time where Francis was still in the picture and Jon was willing to fight him. And then Francis left. And then I think the Gane Blades thing to Jon was a little like blah, like, oh, maybe we'll fight Gane, maybe we'll fight Blades for a title. But I think the heavyweight title was the interesting thing to him there, right? And I think with Stipe, he still seems to hold Stipe's name in very high regard. Like, he's one of the greatest heavyweights ever. I can put him on my resume as well. And so we started to see that with Alex Pereira, like when Jon was putting these tweets out about like wanting to fight him and think about the numbers that could do and yada, yada, yada. So I think with Aspinall's growing value here, I do think that he could be talked into this. Like, I don't think Jon's very dismissive when it comes to the future, but I genuinely think what Aspinall's doing could very well work. And I mean, he's winning too. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. So this could all be just some sort of build to make the fight seem bigger as well. I think whether it's intentional or not on Jon's part, I do think circumstantially there'll be a very good likelihood that when it comes time that Aspinall is the guy that he can either fight or he can retire. I do think that he'll end up. I think he'll end up fighting Tom.
And that was kind of one of the end tweets of his long string there, right? In response was, maybe the UFC will offer me a bag I can't refuse. And Dana was asked about that at the Contender Series press conference. He's like, well, exactly. There you go. So I think he knows the game Jon is playing here when it comes to that. I don't necessarily agree with his follow-up statement saying, what fight have we not made when it comes to stuff like this? There is abundance of them, including one involving Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. But, obviously Anderson Silva, GSP, the list goes on. So there is flaw to that. But when there's a will, there's a way. And if the UFC wants that fight bad enough, I'm sure, maybe they make it worth Jon's while. I don't know.
Yeah. Fedor and Brock, Fedor and Randy, Cyborg and Rousey. I don't know if Cyborg could have ever made 140, but maybe you could have given Rousey enough of a bag to do 145. Matt Wells, go ahead.
Yeah, no. While you're there talking about fights that didn't get made, don't buy this revisionist history Dana's trying to put out now about the Ngannou Jones fight. Mm-hmm. He's on record saying that Jon Jones didn't want the fight, telling him to go back down to middleweight. Like there's a bunch of things he said about Jon Jones not wanting to fight Francis Ngannou. Today he's telling a different story. So the timelines just don't match up. I'll just say that.
Yeah, his revisionist history is questionable. Trump's loyal. Remember when he was with Affliction? He hated him. He had to counter program him. James Irvin versus Anderson Silva. On 3 weeks' notice, he put that card together.